Hey, friends. Thank you so much for joining me today for the 8th episode of Conversations with Parents Who Write. I hope everybody has had a fabulous day. I'm excited about tonight's episode because I'm going to be joined with my first poet guest speaker, Dominique Snedeker. Dominique is a U.S. Air Force Academy graduate with a Bachelor's of Science in English, an Air Force veteran, a military spouse, and a stay-at-home mom to a house full of boys. She currently lives with her husband and 3 boys ages 2, 6, and 8 in Minot, North Dakota. I hope I said that correctly. She recently released a book of poetry, Motherhood, The Crucible of Love, and has multiple projects in the works, including another poetry book about living in North Dakota titled Cold. She is also working on a poetry book about mistakes, faith, and the peace bringer, and collaborating with artist Eileen Faro, I'm not sure how to say her name. I'll ask Dominique to let me know. On a children's picture book titled Natasha and the Truck. I am going to invite her in now. Hey, there we
Hello, did we
go.
do it?
Yay!
Yay. Hold on. Yeah, good.
All right. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm really excited to be here today.
Oh, I'm really excited to have you. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, I'm delighted to have other talks with other parents and conversations on technology. My kids are hiding somewhere, so my husband has them, and so it's my girl time or my adult time, if you will.
Very nice. Very nice. Yes, my husband does bedtimes on Thursday nights. And yes, because there's no way that I would be on here. Otherwise, my kids would be banging on the door and coming in for hugs and everything.
I'm waiting to find the baby and be like, Mama, because he's only 2. So if he can't see me for like 20 minutes, he's like, where is she?
I mean, that's the reality for us, right?
Right, exactly.
And also precious. Like,
We're gonna miss it, I think, when they get older and they're like, "Go away, mom." I think I just recently wrote a poem actually about that. Like, this is the moment that we have, and we need to be here in this moment because soon it's not gonna be mommy. It's gonna be like, "Go away, I got this."
yeah, I'm starting to see that with my almost 7-year-old. He'll be turning 7 in a week and a half. But I'm already starting to see that with him. Whereas my 4-year-old, he comes downstairs in the morning and he immediately goes downstairs into the basement to find my husband and have some morning time with him. But he stops off and he's like, I'll come back and give you snuggles, mama. And I'm like, okay,
Take him.
I want the snuggles.
My 6-year-old still folds himself into my. He condenses his like giant 6-year-old. He's really tall, 6. He's the biggest kid in his class. He folds himself into this ball and sits in my lap still. But my 8-year-old, who's going to be in 3rd grade this next year, and he's like, Mom, every once in a while he'll like slink and fall onto me. And I'm like, oh, it's like an accidental like cuddle. And I'm like, I'll take it. I'll take whatever I can get from you, like big kid.
Yeah. Yeah, my husband gets the snuggles from our 6-year-old, and I get the snuggles mostly from our 4-year-old. So my husband was like, okay, we're both covered at least. We both are getting some love in here.
It's funny how dad snuggles are. Like he's got to be watching like cartoons with the boys, and then they just flop on him. But if they're not watching cartoons, they're like, unless they're like, he doesn't like. We're old, so he's like, we're too old to wrestle. Like, so he's like, we can just sit next to each other. Like, and I'm like, come on, sit on top of me. It's cool. Everybody can fit on me. And sometimes dads
Yeah.
are different. They're like, yeah.
Yeah. My husband's been lamenting that he's going to be, oh, I have to stop and think. He's going to be 45 and he's complaining like to our 6-year-old. He's like, bud, you are too big to be jumping on me and my back. And like, yeah, my 6-year-old just wants to like cannonball on
Right?
top of my husband. And he's like, you will break me.
It's like having like one of those like Saint Bernard as a lap dog. Like you're no longer a lap child, kid. You're like a sit next to me child. Like
Yes. Yes. Cartoons are also really the only time that I can get snuggles from my 6-year-old. He'll yes, just like slowly lean into me and I'll be like, yes, I got him.
I know
Yeah.
that's the actually the funny enough, if we're going to talk about writing, that is kind of the focus of the second book I'm starting to write. I'm actually realized I'm 35 pages into it. I've only written a couple poems, but it's about having older children, meaning like 6, 7, 8, 9, you know, like not babies anymore. And it's funny because you know, when you just start writing, you're not sure how it's going to be. But that's basically the conversation I'm having with myself is cherish the moment. Don't be annoyed. Cherish the moment because it's going to go. It's going to go. Like, so I think that's my second book is going to be, well, there's like 3 books right now happening, but that's my second mom book is that. So I just think it's interesting how in the moment, you know, for me, I have to write. I know I'm jumping right into it, sorry, but
No,
I have
please
to
do.
document it. I have to document the, you know, the emotions I'm having. And so I've looked back through my life and I noticed I've documented all these great transitions with writing. And so, anyway, all that to say, parents, write it down, right? Regardless if you're a poet or you can't write a sentence, it's chicken scratch, it doesn't matter. Write it down. My grandma's kept a journal for 75, 80 years and she can go back through all of her journals and find out when so and so broke her arm to the day, you know. And she's a practical person, so none of her stuff is emotional, but it's all important to like remember these moments because they go by, and when you get older, you know, are they kids? Who was I? What was I like when I was a baby? And I'm like, I don't know. You were one of the 3 boys. I don't know what you did. You know, like if we write it down, we can remember. So anyway, that's just my soapbox.
No, I really appreciate that. Also, I love just jumping in. Um, I with my first kid, I kept notes on my app on my phone, and
Yeah.
they're very like I was in survival mode so much. So they're just bullet points
Yep.
of lost his tooth or first tooth came in, starting to crawl, like just date and this was the thing. And then with my second kid, I remembered going back and being so sad that I didn't capture more for my first kid. So with my second kid, he's got like whole paragraphs. I'm like, I'm so
Nice.
sorry that I didn't think to do it the first time round. Like I was in the moment enjoying it with my first kid, but now it's gone and I'm like, oh, I don't have as much detail to hold on to with my first baby who's not a baby.
Yeah. It's hard. Yeah, I realize I've done no writing with the baby. Like I haven't put any, I mean, other than what I posted on Facebook, which is another way that we, in this modern culture, Facebook and Twitter and all these things are now our ways of documenting. We don't send letters, we don't do journals, we do these electronic things. And so I think that's something too, we have to understand the shift in technology has shifted the way we remember things. And so whether or not it's easier to scroll through Facebook, you know, and to see things, or who's going to see it, right? Like your memories before were kept in a journal and letters, and the only people that would see it would be those people reading those things. But now it's open for a broader audience. And so how do you feel sharing some of those memories with some versus other people? And so this whole way of communicating has changed and shifted between our grandparents' generation and our generation. And I find that really interesting how that affects our writing and our memories. And so I just think it's a different way of remembering than we have a different way of remembering now. And whether or not it's a long-term way of maintaining these memories or not, you know, how's our technology going to crash 100 years from now and there's going to be no documentation of like the 2000s because our technology has been obliterated and nobody wrote letters and we have all this documentation before then. You know, I have all these thoughts all the time. So anyway, all that to say, you know, maybe we should keep some pen and paper notes somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. When I had to go fill in the blanks for a lot of my first kids' significant milestones, I had to scroll through Facebook and be like, okay, let me
Yep.
try to. Oh, look, there's the photo when his first tooth popped in. Great, I can save the date. So I've written it down now in my app in my phone.
Exactly. And that is a whole other way of remembering. And it's nice because it pops up. You're like, oh, that, you know, like you see it regularly because it's like, here's your pictures. Google's like, here's your pictures from 5 years ago today. And I'm like, thanks. I like that you're reminding me. So but it's also more things you have in your mind so that your memories. I actually wrote a poem about this. The more pictures you take, the less your memory remembers what it remembers. And you remember those pictures. And so sometimes I don't go back through my pictures and look. until I can't remember anything anymore because I don't want to remember the pictures. I want to remember the moments.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I've written about that. Like sometimes we get lazy, want to look back at pictures, and then we can't remember anymore because our brain then like imprints those pictures onto our memories. And so that's just something to be wary of too. Like the more you take pictures, the less your brain holds. It's a very
Wow,
weird science.
that is so true, and I didn't even realize it. Like, I call 2011 the summer of love because that was when my husband and I first met, and we were just traveling and doing all these things together and falling madly in love with each other. But I have to go back and look at the pictures and be like, man, we did so much. I don't actually remember everything that we did. And it's hard for me to recall a lot of those memories.
Yeah.
That's
It's
interesting.
It's the same thing as like when we were kids, we didn't have all this technology. So we had to remember our grandma's phone number when we were like 3 and 4, right? Like 5. I know those numbers I memorized as a kid, but any number I put in my phone, I just don't remember it anymore because we've been able to put half of our brain into our technology. And so I've
Yeah.
noticed I've had a trip where I didn't take photography. Like I lived 3 years in the Middle East when I was in the Air Force, and I didn't take a lot of pictures there. I was grieving the loss of a relationship when that's what we did. So I just didn't. And I did a lot of writing there. And I tell you, I can get myself back into that place, a space of mind in the Middle East. I can drive down the streets, but I have like 2 pictures, and I have so much memory of that place. And I think it's because I didn't take the pictures. I didn't store my memories in something else. I stored them in myself. And so I've lived other places where I've taken lots of pictures and I'm like, I don't remember what it looked like. I don't remember when I went there. I know I went there, but then I have to ask my husband. He's like, well, look at the pictures. And I'm like, that's exactly the problem.
Wow, that's really interesting.
So
Huh.
I think that's a reason why words are important because you're storing memories in your paper, but you're not your brain can still make those images for yourself, you know. So I mean, if you want to get back to the idea of writing it down, it's the writing of the thing that holds the memory, but it's not superseded by something that's imprinted itself. Like, and so you can go back and relive that memory through the words and have your own images, you know, populate that memory versus the picture on your screen. So anyway, interesting
Yeah. No,
ideas.
I completely agree with that because when I first started doing live videos for Life Beyond Parenting, one of my earlier videos, uh, I shared a few poems that I had written 20 years ago, which I was very embarrassed to even share. But part of Life Beyond Parenting is giving a voice to us parents, and that even includes our past selves. So
Right.
I wanted to give past Erin a chance to be heard. And one of the poems that I had written, the first time I read the poem, I was like, I don't remember writing this until I got to the very last line. And the memories immediately came back. I could remember what I was feeling in that moment. I could remember everything I thought. And it was amazing to just instantly be transported back to that moment in time and get to
That emotional
re-experience it.
space. Yeah. It's that really an emotional space. Like it creates the space in the writing and it creates space for your body, your memories to go into that same headspace, which is why I like poetry.
It's like time
So
travel.
it is. I think the idea with poetry is that you capture the essence of a moment. You don't spend your details like Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens was like, hey, they sat on a bench that was 55 years old and it was hand painted and it's painted blue, and all of a sudden the memory is now you're not going to remember that bench, but your emotional headspace in a poem is like we sat on the bench that contained all the thoughts of 100 years of people sitting there. You know, you take the essence of a moment and you capture it in words with as little detail as possible so that you can fill in that place with poetry. That's why poetry is very powerful emotionally, whereas like prose are very powerful like image storytellers. But poetry is not as much for storytelling. It's more for image capturing, memory capturing, emotions, sentiments, those types of things. And so I think that's people, you know, they're like, oh, I don't really like poetry. Well, poetry is kind of different because you're not capturing usually. You might be using a scene to capture something, but that scene isn't capturing the scene. It's capturing an idea. And so poetry is all about ideas and those types of things, whereas prose is this long drawn out story or idea or something that you're reiterating over and over and expanding upon. And so poetry is like a sticky note of an idea.
Yes. Sticky note of an idea. I love that. That is exactly why I fell absolutely in love with Emily Dickinson. The first time I read her poetry, I hated it. Gonna be honest, I hated it. And then I had a professor, Professor Bomba, who had assigned Emily Dickinson to the class, and our whole class started whining and complaining about having to read her poems. And this man, who was very monotone and laid back and kind of quiet, he stood up at the podium and he gave it to us. He gave us an impassioned speech about how she was able to capture truth in such few words with such powerful images and word choices. And the poem that he specifically walked us through line by line was "There's a certain slant of light. Winter afternoons that oppresses like the heft of cathedral tunes." And he broke down each image, and I just remember him standing there like, have you ever been outside in wintertime and watched the clouds part just a little bit for that slant of light to come down? And picture how you can capture that, like if you've been inside the church and how oppressive the sound of cathedral tunes are. The way he brought it up, like, I was absolutely in love with Emily Dickinson from that moment.
When you get a good professor and someone that understands poetry, it really, I had one professor too. He was Colonel Zimmerman. Yeah, Colonel Zimmerman at the Air Force Academy. And here at the Air Force Academy, you've got people that are officers in the Air Force being professors. But this guy wasn't meant to be an officer in the Air Force. He was a really good officer, but he was a fantastic professor. And he walked us up and down the stairs. We were reading Ode to a Grecian Urn. We, like the depth that he got our conversations. And I already was in love with language. But this is when I really fell in love with literature and poetry, like Percy Bysshe Shelley, like the Romantics. I really like the Mount Blanc, this moment of sublimity, like sublimity, the sublime moment. How about that? And what does it really mean? And these are conversations like I've thought about since, I miss having those deep conversations. But in poetry, I think you can have those deep conversations with yourself. We're isolated as parents. I'm having a great conversation about right now. It's like How to Train Your Dragon. Like I can tell you all about the different dragons and how to train your dragon. And that's not so mentally stimulating if you want to know. But when I write a poem and it's midnight, I'm typing as fast as I can, I'm having a deep conversation with myself. And I like that because I've missed that. I miss that intellectual stimulation. But I think in poetry or in writing anything really, if you're sitting down and you just release your ideas and let your ideas play with your mind and then you read it back, and it's like you're playing with yourself. You're having this stimulating intellectual conversation with yourself, and that feels really good to your brain. For those of us who miss college and sitting, and I love lectures and listening to the teacher talk about stuff. So that is also another tip to us stay-at-home moms, because I am one. Are you a stay-home mom or you work?
I'm at home.
Okay. Yeah. So we have this verbal diarrhea when our husbands get home. We're like, hey, did you know? I can't finish a single sentence. My thoughts are going everywhere. Our husband's like, are you crazy? Like, I just have talked to 5 people today at work, and I do not want to talk to you right now. I need to have some downtime because I have 3 words left in my word bucket. And we're like, what did you know? So then the kids are like, yeah, and did you know about the dragons? And then baby's like, monster truck, monster truck. You're like, yep, this is great. I'm going to fry it. So then you go home and you get everybody to bed, and the husband is fed, and you get him to bed because he's got to go to sleep. And you sit down at the computer and you sigh, and then it comes. The ideas come. At least that's what I found, that when the quiet time comes, I desperately need to sleep, but I desperately need to find that place where I am my intelligent, intellectual self. And I know you're nodding, so I know you feel that moment too. And I'm sure that's why most of us parents write, is we need this intellectual stimulation. Like, We need to know that we exist somewhere behind the do of everything that we have to do. And the give, and then there's ourselves. We have to nurture ourselves too.
Yes, 100% we have to nurture ourselves. Again, Life Beyond Parenthood started because of the fact that I had completely lost all sense of myself after becoming an at-home parent. And it wasn't even after becoming an at-home parent. It slowly started after I had my first child and I was still working
Mm-hmm.
3/4 time. But yeah, it was just this slow progression, loss of self. And I didn't see it
Mm-hmm.
happening. I didn't understand it. I was like, no, I'm in the present, I'm enjoying. But then I started to get crankier and more depressed, and my anxiety was getting worse, my depression was getting worse, and then I was getting mad at myself because why am I not enjoying this beautiful life that I actively worked to create with my family? And nobody had ever educated or prepped or talked to me about why it was so vital for me to make time for myself while
Right.
also starting a family. And so it took me 4 to 5 years to finally realize that if I want to be happier, I got to start with me and get back to me and rediscover me. And I did that through writing. Finally picked up the pen again.
That's the story. That is exactly the story that's in my book. I'm just going to flash it here. It says Motherhood, the Crucible of Love. Because you just went through the process that I went through also. And I think there's so many women out there that judge themselves because they're feeling like this is what I've always wanted, to stay home, be lucky enough to stay home, not have to work, which sometimes it's easier for us to stay home than to work financially. And so we miss work. We're giving up work. I gave up a military career mostly to do this, like we have sacrificed part of ourselves because we want this, and then we're a little bit unhappy in it, and then we start judging ourselves for that, like there is something wrong with me, I'm failing as a woman, I'm failing as a parent, not understanding that every woman ever, including my perfect grandmother who has raised 4 women and she does everything right, she felt angsty in the middle of it too. And she didn't say anything till I'm like 37 years old, having a near panic attack. And she's like, well, I just winged everything I did. I was like, what? I thought you did it all perfectly. And I tell you, that release of my grandma saying that she winged it and she was just trying to survive just released my own expectations on myself. And I think that as a mom, and too, because they have an expectation to be this perfect dad, let's go play baseball in the back or whatever it is that dads do. And then when we can't do that because we're in a different culture, in a different society, in a different time, we judge, and that throws us into deeper depression and postpartum depression if we already have that. And that is the conversation as a mom, as a writer, I want to have with women in general, that you're feeling bad about yourself is normal and it shouldn't happen, but it's the self expectations that you put on yourself. And it's okay to be confused, and it's okay to be frustrated, and it's okay to make mistakes as a mom. And guess what? It's gonna be okay, and you're okay. And we've all been there, and don't judge yourself. Like this is just things I needed to hear as a postpartum depression mom. So just a little plug on, not really a plug for my book, but really if we're going to talk about poetry, like this is what this is all about, is this search for where did I go? I don't recognize this person in the mirror that's gained 50 pounds or the gray hair. I had to cut my hair short because it wouldn't come back. I don't recognize the fact that I'm just a nasty, mean, heinous person. I'm always mad at everybody all the time.
Yeah.
And what happened to that girl I really liked? I really, really liked the girl before. And now I have to mourn her. And she's gone. Is she? Is she really gone though? Because look at that kid. There's that baby. I love that face. Oh, this baby is so awesome. Like, oh my gosh, I love this baby, but why can't I just want to sleep. And this is the process I'm going through as I'm writing this over a period of about 5 or 6 months. And eventually I come to this place, like I have a huge responsibility and I'm failing at all this other stuff. It's so heavy. I'm judging myself for it. And then I realize I'm learning to be a parent just like they're learning to be small people. And that this small person is shaping me just as much as I'm shaping that small person. And when we have children, they are created to help us become better human beings, even as we're creating them, helping them create them to become adults. And so it's this give and take symbiotic relationship that I think we expect ourselves to be these perfect parents. In reality, it's our children that shape us into perfect parents. And so that's the conclusion of my story is like, oh, I thought I was the one shaping you. All the time you've been shaping me. And I'm a better person for it. And that person I thought I was, I still am. And it's this whole process. And so I just was talking you through my process. But
no, I love that. And I appreciate it so much because, and that's why I'm doing these now, because to help the me from 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, and I didn't see it coming. I didn't,
yeah,
you know, some of my friends saw it coming. They were like, Erin, what are you
they're
doing
like,
for you? And I was like, what are you talking about?
what do you mean? And
What?
it's hard to find the time or, to feel like you're worth it sometimes, like, well, I yelled at my kids today. I do not deserve to have me time. I should go clean the house or whatever. You kind of punish yourself for these mistakes you make that I call it, you couldn't find the moment for what it was. The moment is the kid needs you and you don't need the kid at the moment. And so there's this conflict, like I need to have space and you need me. And so who's going to win this battle? Well, oftentimes the parents win because they're just short circuiting at that moment. And then you judge yourself for yelling or whatever it is that you do that you don't like. And so it is hard to know that it's okay to make time for yourself.
Yes. Yes. Oh, okay, good. There was a delay in the audio for a minute. I was like, oh no, did I lose you? And no, that was a delay. Yeah. No, thank you so much. It's such an important message to get out there for parents, every single one of us. And writing really is the way that I've been finding my way back to me again. I've been tinkering with poetry again, and I'm so judgmental of what I'm producing. I mean, I'm a completely different person than I was 20 years ago. I started out with poetry, especially through my teen years, early 20s. When I was in college, I did a lot of poetry, and then I moved more into fiction. But now that I have opened up the floodgates to my creativity again, I've been really dabbling in nonfiction, fiction, and poetry again. But I feel the least knowledgeable about poetry. I remember studying it in college. I remember looking at other poets' work and us discussing like what techniques they were using and then how we could imitate that with our own thoughts and ideas to try to get a sense of how to do that. But I don't know, I just feel very inadequate with my poetry attempts right now, but it's not stopping me. I mean, what I've been preaching lately is better do it scared and imperfect than rather not at all. So I'm going for it. But yeah,
that's exactly my story. That I wrote poetry from a kid. I still find them every once in a while, like these rhyming poems that are, I tried to do sonnets. I could write an iambic pentameter in high school. Like I was like, I could write an iambic pentameter. I can't even do that now. Like, I've gone through a lot of my college stuff and I was like, oh, this is pretty on point right now with what's happening. Well, what's happened, I worked at Barnes and Noble. Okay, so I was a stay-at-home mom pretty much forever, but when I came home from Germany, we lived in Germany as military. I told my husband I've got to get a job or I'm going to die. Like I'm going to short circuit. I'm in such bad postpartum depression. Something bad is going to happen. So I worked evenings 3 or 4 times a week at a bookstore, which was a perfect place. And I noticed this trend of poetry moving from the very back of the store to the front of the store and becoming a bestseller. And so that's with this internet poetry happening. Like I think this was right before TikTok really bloomed, but these younger, like late teens, early 20 somethings writing these poetries. Rory Kaur, I can never say their names right, but I have all their books in my mind. And so I flipped one of those books open and I was reading. I was like, oh, I wrote this already. Like I've written this. So that gave me encouragement to see that, like, we in our mind as these older generation, like, what are we, like the tweeners? We're not really Gen X, and we're not whatever was before Gen X, like millennials. We're like some in between, tiny little group.
Tiny little niche.
Zennials, yeah, so like Zennials or something like that.
Yeah, that's me definitely.
Yeah, I think something like that. But so we think poetry is Shakespeare or Mount Blanc or, Percy Bysshe Shelley, or we're thinking, all this imagery, this really deep stuff, and they're talking about just getting the emotions out.
Yeah.
And so I think that there is an expectation of what poetry looks like that isn't popular anymore. Like, people don't like to read rhyming poetry or stuff with rhythm. They want to feel the emotion. They want to get the scene. They want to go through the process of the angst and then the clarification of cleaning, getting through the angst and finding the resolution at the end. And so
Mm.
I've found that I think my poems are pretty bad, and then I go back and read them a month later, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. If a poem right now, I think if we're going to set aside the classic idea of poetry, but put it into what we need in this culture right now, is it's a process. So if somebody reading a poem goes through the process with the writer of the poem, and it brings them through some sort of cathartic moment.
Mm.
So you're writing about being a mom and finding yourself. Well, so is that reader then going through that process, but they might arrive at a different conclusion than you did. So, for instance, I wrote this poem, and I was sharing it with my best friend, and I wrote about like how I used to be this and now I am this, and I used to be this and now I am this, and I used to be this and now I'm this, and I used to be alone but now I have you, and it's supposed to be all touchy feely. And when she read it, she bust out laughing. She's like, ha ha ha, that's so funny. I was like, why? And she's like, oh, because you used to be beautiful and have friends and do all these things, and now you're old and haggard, and now I've got you, like, snarky. I was like, I didn't mean it snarky. And she's letting out a gut wrenching laugh, and she must have laughed for 5 minutes, where I'm like choked up. At least I have you. I was willing to sack. And you know what? It's awesome, because that was her cathartic moment. It was a process she went through, and it came to a different conclusion than I did. It wasn't a happy, like, or sentimental. It was really snarky, and like, but it relieved the same pressure out of her. And so I think a lot of times the poetry that is needed right now it's like a pressure valve release. And
Mm.
so it's a process that you bring the reader through so that they can also release these emotions that we aren't able to be still enough to have. We're not sitting there looking at a mountain gazing, oh, beauty is truth and truth is beauty, or a Grecian urn, and thinking, oh, this has been locked in time. Like, no, we're sitting there thinking, like, I've got 15 emails to answer, and I've got 2 seconds, and I'm about to cry over something I don't know. Let me read a poem, and oh, okay, I can handle my life now. Like, this is really fast stuff we got to go through.
Yes.
So I think I would encourage people like you that are unsure about our writing skills of poetry, which I can't write prose. I mean, I can write prose as long as there's no plot. Like, if
Mm.
you want to add a plot, I'm terrible. Like, my plot is like, oh, she lost her shoe and then she found her shoe. But I can write about the angst of that moment, like the terror of not finding her perfect slipper for the ball. Like, this is terrible in this scene and all that, and the godmother, but I cannot tell you what's going to happen after that scene. So good for you to write the entire idea. But for those of you who are trying to hone your skills or develop different parts of yourself, be encouraged that it might sound really terrible to yourself, but then you read it to somebody else and they're like, wow, like, that meant something to me. I've been there. Like, so that's the kind of thing I think that we need to judge ourselves on. Does it help the reader come to some sort of conclusion in their mind, an emotional release, something like that?
Yeah. Well, no, thank you. I
That's
really
really
appreciate that. I I truly appreciate when writers, poets such as yourself help spread more encouragement and confidence to more parents out there, or writers and poets who want to be, regardless parent or not, right? Just putting
right.
more encouragement for creativity out there.
Yeah. And then I just think technology has really changed how um, art looks. Like, we've got, instead of having these long drawn out stories, people don't have time for that. They've got these like novellas that are happening, or these vellums that are happening. So they're little like TV shows, but of books. It's kind of going back to the old time when Charles Dickens wrote, and
Yeah.
then he put parts of his stories into the newspaper. We're kind of cycling back because we don't have time to sit and read anymore. We don't have time. So then we're doing books on tape, or not tape. See, that's how old I am. Like, I still like to put my CD in or my tape. Like, I don't like things in my ears. So I get a headache with Bluetooth. Um, And my husband thinks I'm crazy. He's like, you and technology. I'm like, yeah, every Apple, anything I've ever had has died within 3 months. I don't do Apple whatsoever. He's like, you're crazy. I'm secretly like Cerebrus or something. Like my mind is so big, like it explodes everything Apple. That's my secret superhuman power.
Wow. Very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool. It's
Yeah.
all of the
Not really
creativity
expensive.
that's just, it's the creativity
Oh yeah.
radiating around you. Yeah.
That's why my hair
Yeah,
gets so
exactly.
big sometimes. It's the creativity flowing.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So I think that's an interesting thing though to talk about is how, your creativity outlet is being shaped nowadays versus what we think of as creativity, like people are doing art now on the computer, they're typing on their phones, like this is a whole other type of conversation we're having. We're not having longer ones, we're having short snippets. Like we used to go to Facebook where we had Facebook posts. Well, now we're going to Twitter where we have like Twitter posts, and like Instagram is like a sentence or whatever, like we're having to condense everything down, and so it's learning to really capture what really 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 matters and letting go of what doesn't.
Yes.
So
Trimming the fat.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is
So,
great for learning how to write. How many times, like after you write
mhm.
something, go back and trim off as much fat as you can from what you've written.
Edit, edit, edit.
Edit, edit, edit. Um, well, first, this has been an utterly amazing conversation. So thank you immensely. I also love the fact that we didn't once go at my reserved questions to help to as a prop there, just in case we're like, okay, I'm tired. I was out in the sun on the playground for 3 hours today, and I cannot think of something to say right now. Boom.
Right.
Which was actually me today. But
Oh wow. I was
3
trying to be
hours.
outside. It was so windy. That's crazy. What were you doing for 3 hours?
We were at the playground.
Just playing? Just
Yeah,
playing?
he was playing, and I was like, he needs to climb. He's been inside for 3 days. He's going berserk. Climb on the playground for 3 hours. I will sit here in the shade, and then I was like, okay, I guess I'll create a TikTok reel. so,
Right.
so
We
that's
do
what I
all of
did.
our working. Yeah.
And
We
then
tried to go outside. Yeah.
but then
Oh.
I felt guilty where I was like, oh, why wasn't I sitting here watching my child and enjoying the moment and being present? And then I was like, Arian, it was 3 hours. Make your TikTok video. Like you're sitting here. You gotta have
Yeah.
something going. So
Yeah, you can't. That's true. After a certain amount of time, you're allowed to look down and look somewhere else.
yeah. And he's
Yeah.
he's precious. He'll run up to me and get a hug, or well, actually usually he comes up to me and it's snack. I want a snack.
Oh,
Like, okay.
you have a hungry one.
Yes. I want another
Yeah.
snack. Yes. So what I wanted to do was have you share something, and then at the closeout, I love to talk about favorite books and favorite books among your kids. So that's
Okay.
okay. So you're up, and please share one of your poems. I can't wait to hear it.
Okay. So, as we're discussing what motherhood is really about, like the essence of motherhood, I wrote this poem and realized it's like the thesis statement of my book. And so I want to share that to you, and then I want to share the conclusion. So that's like the end of the book. But let me take a sip real quick.
Okay, yes. I forgot my water
And in the
outside.
meantime, we tried to go outside and play, but I'm in North Dakota and it was so windy that it blew the baby's four-wheel little like bike thing that he scoots around on all the way over. It blew the cups over that were sitting outside. It was so windy, we couldn't do anything. It was like the baby was screaming, so we had to come back inside. So
Yeah.
we would like to do 3 hours at the playground sometime in the summer. It's never, North Dakota is very brutal. That's my second book. I'm not sure if it's called Cold, and it's about living in the brutal territory of North Dakota and how angry the wind and really the wind is. The wind is really angry up here. And I don't know why it has such a chip on its shoulder, but this is the conversation I'm having with me and my computer. So if you really want to find out, it's called Cold. At some point, it'll be published. Okay, back to the motherhood conversation. Motherhood. I have laid down all that I was, all that I am, on this altar called motherhood. Everything I ever was before And everything I will be again will always remain in its fire, being consumed. For the first time, though, I am no longer mine. I belong to someone, and that can't be withdrawn, redacted, retracted, or retraced. That impact of you're immutably changed once you become a mother. Nothing can take that away, not life nor death, not divorce, not being, abandoning you're always going to be that person's mother. DNA makes that the fact. And so from that point on, you're always going to be living in the middle of that. And so
yeah, that's exactly
that to me was a realization that there's nothing that can ever change this relationship between my child and I. Nothing, never, ever again.
Everything I do from now on will always be through the lens of being a parent.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. All that to come to the very end of the conclusion. It's called motherhood, transmogrified. Transmogrified. I should know this. I wrote this. You have shaped me. You have formed me. I was mistaken. It was not I who gave you life. Your very breath, that breath yet without decay, has flowed into my lungs, and I am reborn. And there's the baby. The game's afoot. I thought all along that I was the shy baby, that I was the shaper of all things, that my existence was the framework for your reality. But I didn't even know what reality was until you hurled yourself, screaming insatiable, into my arms, raw, alive, purifying. My life isn't you, but you have given me life. You are yours, I am mine, I know that. Soon you will break free from me, and without even a backward glance, you'll be gone. And still I will be mine, reshaped, recalibrated, redistributed by you. Where's your bed? All the essence, all the stuff I was before has been fired in your tempest. Excuse me for a second, let me get him situated. Time and pressure has turned my imagination into gems, myself into concentrated gold. I gave you life and you took it. You took mine. But you returned it to me one chisel, one brush stroke, one grain of sand at a time. A treasure I never was before, but now a treasure all the same.
I'm trying not to cry. Well, no, it's not like, wow, sorry, yeah. Okay. Sorry.
But that's it. That's it. Like, it's supposed to bring us through this. I've only been able to read my poems without crying for about a week and a half. Because I've had to do some book readings. And so it's been this process of it's supposed to bring you to this place of emotional release, either joy, happiness, sadness. But then you feel it, So I'm glad it did it to you, because that means it works. It works.
Yeah, no, definitely. Especially, and I make an effort to tell my kids that they are my treasure. So that connects me to what I remind them, but I also love the idea of me being a treasure. I never really stop and think about that.
Oh, can I read you something then? This is okay. This is one that I think is important. This is for the moms out there. Motherhood, the scales fall like tears. Do you remember who you are yet? Have you found the crown that always sat unnoticed behind piles of hair? But a crown, even unseen, is still there, and you are still you, even if you had forgotten for a while, and couldn't see past the tangles and puffy black eyes with restless, frustrated energy. Have you noticed yet your sweeping grace, that you soothe those around you with a touch or a look, or even just by walking into a room, a sure sign of royalty if ever there was one? Your subjects are most loyal and swear fealty to you with every tug, every reach, just every one more kiss. Do you remember those dreams you had? Look around you and start to count. For toys and trucks and Legos and bows, mismatched socks and lost shoes are what you hoped for. You had just forgotten. Remember who you are. You dance. instead of in the rain to songs about buses and monkeys, but you dance just the same. Remember, see it. You lead people every day and inspire small hearts to be mighty. Remember yourself. You are right here. They see you every day and know that you are everything you'd hoped you'd be and more.
That's really beautiful.
It chokes me up too.
I know. I really need that. How many of us really need that? Thank you so much for choosing those. Also, the image that really hit me in the conclusion one about the child like screaming into our arms, right? Was that the image? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So my first baby, I had not such a great pregnancy. Was hospitalized at 28 weeks. Not fun. Scary stuff. Made it through to 37 weeks. C-section. And then he was 3.5 pounds and had to go straight to the NICU. So all I saw were his eyes and his nose. And then, because of the C-section, I wasn't allowed to walk for several hours. So I couldn't see him. And then they had to shut down the bay that he was in because one of the other babies in the NICU needed heart surgery. So all in all, I had to wait 30 hours before seeing my baby. And when they, I haven't written about this one yet, but trust me, it's coming because that is something that has stayed with me, obviously. But when they wheeled me into the NICU unit, finally, after 30 hours, and they took him out of his little incubator and where he was nice and toasty warm, and they take him out of that and they unwrap him into the freezing cold and they present him to me sideways, and he was just like coming at me, and I was like terrified. I was like, what is this thing coming at me? And then they put him on my chest and he curled up and he got quiet and he was perfectly content. And I was like, oh, hello there. Who are you? But that's what I pictured with the screaming into your arms, is because I was like shocked and terrified that this was my first meeting after this terrible separation.
No, can't imagine. That is something there. That's a long time. I mean, that's wrong for the baby too. Like,
yeah,
that is something you should write about. There's so many women who go through something like that, and that I think this traumatic birth stories are really important to live through and to reconcile, like grief through that loss of those moments. And I mean, things turn out okay in the end, but I mean, I think that we as a society don't give place for women to grieve that.
yeah,
Even with a miscarriage, there's no place to grieve the loss of a baby. There's no place to grieve the loss of the birth story you ought to have had things gone correctly. And I think that's important for women. This is the most, I mean, getting married is pretty important, and graduating from college is pretty important. And for me, commissioning in the Air Force was pretty important. But nothing transforms you like having a baby. Nothing. There's nothing in the world that can compare to that. And that is the most intense, most spiritual, most emotional, most physical moment of your life. And to have it taken for whatever reason by medicine or whatever, there's a loss that's inherent to your soul and your spirit and your body. And to grieve that and to talk about it is something we need to create space for women to do, and not judge them, be like, well, at least you had a healthy baby or whatever. No, like, this is something that's traumatic to the spirit. Not just your soul, like your spiritual energy, like God, your relationship with God is affected by this. Like it's the most sublime, like talk about sublime, right? Like the most sublime moment in the world is when the first breath comes into their lungs. I'm just going to say this out there. I'm a Christian, right? So in the very beginning, the very first scene you have with God and man is he's breathing. into Adam's lungs. And that first moment of breathing into somebody's lungs was a very spiritual moment. You know, breath comes in rushing, and if you don't get that moment with your child, you don't get to see that, you don't get to experience that, or for whatever reason, that's very traumatic. So anyway, sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. I'm slowly starting to work through it now.
Yeah.
Last week or 2 weeks ago, time seems to be blurring together, I finished a piece called At 28 Weeks, When Reality Shifts, and that I needed to explore the moment when we went in for our 28-week appointment and the technician got really quiet and all the red flags started popping up, and we knew, like, oh, and there was just this like steady calm as it was unfolding. And I just needed to explore that moment of the realization hitting me. And it's the piece that I wrote, and every time like another red flag popped up, or the escort to my doctor's private office, like my brain is just shooting out in all these different directions, all these other thoughts that keep popping in. How we handle trauma, right, is our brain trying to rationalize everything. And so I really dove deep into that piece and took time to explore that. And it was very cathartic, and I'm very proud of that piece. It's still emotional for me, but like I'm so glad that I turned it into art to share with other people. And as I said, like that's not the end of the story, as I've shared with you. And I know I'm going to be writing about that. I know I'm going to have a piece eventually that's written or titled 30 Hours.
Oh, yeah.
I know it's going to be there. And I know I'm going to have to write about the moment that the nurse brought me to the doors to go home, and I didn't have my baby with me. And then another mom gets pulled up to the doors and she's got her baby in her arms next to her. So I know I'm going to be writing about that, but it took me almost 7 years to get to a place where I can actually finally write about it, because so much of it I just had to kind of just push it down so I could function and just keep going, because I didn't have time to break down. I needed to get home and get settled so I could go get my my meds for the C-section, so that we could get back to the NICU and get back to our baby. And like I didn't have time to have a breakdown. And it was, you know, I didn't even realize, like even when my husband sent me a picture of him in the NICU with our baby and he got to hold him, and the pictures were like coming into my phone, like I looked at the pictures and I looked at this baby that I was like, okay, he used to be inside me, but like my emotions were muted because I couldn't allow myself to process the fact that I was denied that chance to be with him.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're so right that this is a very, like, there's so much that we do have to push down as moms to get through, that there's so many people that rely on us, that like our healing process is this long-term, slow, you know, moments here and there that we heal like sporadically. And so sometimes it manifests as different things, you know, anxiety, or I'm sure you had some anxiety with your second one, right? Like how traumatic it was that you're afraid, like, give me my baby, I need my baby, give me my baby. Like I felt that way, and they only took my baby for like 45 minutes. And it was during COVID when I had my third one. And I had a near panic attack. I was like, give me my baby. And they're like, where is your baby? I was like, they took him to go check his hearing, because he did pass his hearing test. And they said it would be 20 minutes, and it's been 45 minutes. And I'm pacing in the hall in my mask. And my husband's like, calm down. He's safe. He's in the hospital. I was like, give me my baby. And like, I laugh about it, but I can't imagine having actually gone through some place where you couldn't get to your baby, and the trauma of having to go through it again a second time. You have 2 or 3, I forget. You have 3?
I have 2.
Right. So,
and the second one, everything was pretty much standard, but it was also a shock. Like when like when I was in the recovery room and I could actually hold him, and I remember just being like, oh,
this is how it's supposed to be.
That's exactly what went through my mind. This is the experience I should have had the first time. And
And
then
then you know what
when I
you're
got to go
missing.
home with him, and this time he was actually next to me in the car seat going home, like I just kept reliving everything I went through with my first kid. And I was, of course, so overjoyed that I got to have this with my second kid, but it made me also look at what I didn't get to have and
Yeah.
recognize the trauma that
Mm-hmm.
I experienced the first time around. When I had to register with the hospital for my second pregnancy, and we walked in the doors of the lobby to register, I started to have a panic attack. And I told my husband, I was like, we're not delivering here. I can't be at this hospital again. And I was completely shocked and caught off guard at the emotional response that I had just stepping foot into that hospital again.
I can imagine. And I think that people downplay the importance of acknowledging that and understanding and respecting those emotional responses because it's an unsafe place for you. And how can you deliver a baby in an unsafe place? Like
Yeah.
I think oftentimes in the birthing community, we push moms into places that they're uncomfortable. And we need to listen to the mom saying, I'm not comfortable with this, or something is happening emotionally that I need to deal with, and that we don't let moms or even dads like come to this place of exploring those ideas. Just get it done, do what you need to do, get the baby out, settle down. You're just having a conniption fit or whatever. These are real things that are real issues, and then they need to be grieved and processed. And so I think writing about your experiences is going to be really powerful for a lot of people, even if I haven't gone through something traumatic like that. But I can identify like the idea. I mean, all of us moms can imagine if we couldn't hold our baby. Like, so I think it'll be a wide group of women that can really appreciate, and you'll help women grieve when you share it. I mean, I think there's a lot of women that have to grieve their traumatic birth stories, and giving voice to that trauma and then exploring it and then coming to some sort of conclusion will really help so many women out there grieve for themselves, maybe not even knowing they need to grieve, not understanding why they have certain panic attacks. You're aware enough to know I panicked when I went into the hospital because of this. But some of these women may not understand they had an emotional trauma in their birthing, and then they have panic attacks later on, but not understanding why. And so when they come across your poetry, it's gonna trigger that cathartic experience for them, help them grieve through. Oh, I had a traumatic birth story. This is something I should and am allowed to and ought to grieve. And so it's giving license for moms to heal. And I think it's important and it's really brave to share our stories like that. So I, having not had a traumatic story like that, respect the fact that you're willing to share it with people, because it's scary to open it up. Like, I'm embarrassed to read my poems in front of my friends because I'm like, what if you don't like it? This is my experience. You want to expose yourself to the world, or write something about yourself. And so it shows a lot of courage to do that. And I think it will help a lot of women. I really do. So I just want to stand by you. And if you ever want somebody to read your stuff and encourage you, I'll be here for you.
Thank you so much. And likewise, like the people that I have met just by doing this show has been, I don't even know how to put it into words right now because I'm a writer. I usually take time to sit and think things through and find the right words. But
You speak with your
really,
fingers.
yeah, right. It's been so uplifting and validating and encouraging to have us band together and support each other and understand the value of the written word and just how it can help us to better understand other people in the world and ourselves. And I just think of making a richer experience and finding the beauty even in those tragic moments. And yeah, but thank you so much. That warmed my heart very much so thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your story too, because I mean like I said, it takes a lot of guts to share. Creative world is one thing, but something you've been through is a whole other. So thank you for sharing too.
Thank you. And thank you for
I've got a plug real quick for a kid's book. Oh, you're welcome. I said I have a plug real quick for a kid's book if you want to end on that.
Yes, please. And I wasn't sure how to say the name that was in my notes. That you're collaborating
Eileen
with
Farrow.
Pharaoh.
Pharaoh. Yeah, she's
Okay.
Portuguese actually, so American Portuguese, and it's actually not my book I want to plug right yet because we're in the developmental stage of the art. The story is written. That's a fun story my grandpa told me a long time ago and then forgot. And apparently he told all the grandkids and then forgot. So we only ever heard it once. And I'm 10 years older than all my other cousins and stuff. So I wrote it having just returned from Ukraine. I visited my best friend as a missionary in Ukraine 10 years ago. And then my other best friend, when I lived in the Middle East, she's an artist. And so we started collaborating back then, 10 years ago, on this, but we didn't know what to do. We didn't know what we were doing. Well, then I fast forward to now, I recently published my poetry book and I said, hey, did you want to collaborate on that book again? And then Ukraine happens. And so we're going to be working on Natasha and the truck as a way to give money back into Ukraine to help refugees. My best friend is over in Ukraine. She's a missionary in Ukraine. She got out the day after the invasion, and she's been in Romania, spent so much money. This is a different best friend, but trying to help the refugees. And so any book proceeds of Natasha and the truck, when you do see it out there, is going to go to refugees, helping Ukrainian refugees. And so that's a plug for that book. But there's a series by Nancy Tillman. The first one is called On the Night You Were Born. And that book, every time I read it, I think it needs to be read to every human being in the world. It is so powerful. It tells you how important and valuable and unique you are, and it needs to be read to every kid every night before they go to bed, every old folks in the old folks' home. On the night you were born, the moon smiled with such wonder that the stars peeked in to see you, and the night wind whispered, life will never be the same. It's so powerful. This woman who wrote it, I think she took the idea from Psalm 91, which was God formed you in your mother's womb, hand formed you and knitted you together intentionally and perfectly. But she took that idea and expanded on it. And she's got 3 or 4 other books that she's done. Her name is Nancy Tillman. And the art is really beautiful, but the idea is you are unique and you are important to the fabric of the world. And without you, life will never be the same. So, one of them is like, my love will go with you wherever you go. And so I just want to plug in for all you moms, dads, grandparents, aunts, uncles, Nancy Tillman and their board books. And on the night you were born is the main one. So
I truly appreciate that. I love, love, love getting book recommendations. And you reminded me of a book that my mentor shared with me and then I've been reading it to my kids, and my 6-year-old doesn't really have like the patience, but every time I read it, I start choking up and crying. And the title of the book is Maybe, and it's written by Kobe Yamada. Yamada. I speak Japanese. You would think I would be able to say this right. So Kobe Yamada. And the book is about, you are the only you there ever has been or ever will be. You are unique in all the universe. Just the odds of you being here at this exact place at this exact time are so great and are so rare that it will never happen again. And the book just talks about, like, maybe you're here to help others speak up. Maybe you're here to shine light into dark places. Maybe you haven't found your reason yet, but it's just this, and it's this child who's it's like a very simple background, but it's this child who is crafting, and he's got a little pig, and the images are just so beautiful. And so it's really a book that could be read to grown-ups as well, that you still have all this potential in you and you can find it. Yeah. And so I love that book. And I don't care if my 6-year-old doesn't really have the patience for it right now. Like, I will keep reading that to him. And yeah, I love that book. Thank you for sharing that. Is there any other, like, one of your all-time favorite books that you want to share? Are you good?
I was going to say, for those of you who want an introduction to rhyming poetry, just read The Bells by Edgar Allan Poe. That book, that poem, just for anybody who's interested in really understanding what classic literature and poetry is about, that poem is about rhythm and rhyme and structure, that the sound of the words create the sound of the bells. And so anybody that struggles with poetry, I recommend that one to read. It's just an eye opener of how incredible language is. So that's not like sentimental or for ideas, but that's really just, it's just for me a poem that's capturing the essence of just the ringing of different kinds of bells and the rhythm and the rhyme scheme. And so I just want to throw that out there. That's probably my favorite poem ever. I get excited every time I read it. I don't cry because it's just really cool. It's not a sentimental one. So it's kind of nice just to have that intellectual, like, aha moment. If I did a TED talk, it would be on the bells. Let's just be real. Like, it's the best, most clever thing ever written. So that's my plug for The Bells by Edgar Allan Poe. And after that, it's going to be Nancy Tillman on The Night You Were Born and all of her other series of books because it's also poetry for kids and with beautiful watercolor, computer generated animals in the background, very clever. So, and
I,
me. Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I, no, really, I'm so excited to see your book. I'm going to be getting it. So I'm really excited to take a look at that. And, there was another book that had, poetry for kids. I love the idea of sharing poetry for kids. And there's this book that we have that I read, and both of my kids, they absolutely love it. I think it's called like Melted Butter.
Ooh.
No? Oh, like melted butter on pancakes, like melted butter on it's gonna drive me crazy. I'll find it and I'll put it. Butter on pancakes. I'm like, what's the name of that? Pancakes. Butter on pancakes. There it is. Like Butter on Pancakes. That is the title of it. By Jonathan London. And every now and again on the page, it's the sun ticks, the birds talk, and it's the imagery that it also creates. Like when the sun shines in through in the morning, it spreads over your bed like melted butter on pancakes.
Ooh.
And my kids love that image, but I love the fact that it's introducing them to how lyrical language can be in the images that it creates. So in my mind, I'm like, I'm getting them hooked on language, but for them, it's a really fun story, and they love it too. The spoon sleeping in the drawers, and the moonlight spills milk for the cat to drink. And my little one's like, ha ha, the cat's drinking the milk. But it's the moonlight. And, yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'm going to definitely look that up.
Yeah, like Butter on Pancakes. I love that one. So
that is nice because most of us, I would say Dr. Seuss is always the one, but sometimes you just need something that doesn't rhyme every word. And so it is important to introduce kids to poetry. We used to have nursery rhymes and now we don't really do them as much. So I'm going to go get Melting Butter on Pancakes.
Yeah, and I'm going to be looking up the one that you said again. So I'll be adding that to my list. That's why I love getting these book recommendations at the end.
Yeah.
So again, just thank you so much for joining me on this show. This has been such a delightful conversation, truly, and touching and tear-jerking.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. So best of luck with all your writing, and I'm right here. Now you know where to find me.
Likewise, and same to you. Thank you. Definitely staying in touch. So you have a wonderful night, and go get those snuggles.
I will. I'll have plenty soon. You too.
Thank you. Bye.